Damos la bienvenida a nuestro segundo pionero. Miles Thorogood es un artista ingeniero de la Universidad British Columbia con investigación en la práctica y la teoría del diseño sonoro y el arte digital interactivo. Su investigación busca identificar modelos formales de creatividad, indagando aspectos de la percepción humana y de los procesos de diseño para codificar estructuras creativas a través de tecnologías asistidas por computadora en entornos de creación de arte generativo.
Muchas gracias, buenos días. Would also like to say that Alexandra Dulich, Dr. Alexandra, who is a collaborator and here to present also today on this work. Alexandra also is from the UBC Okanagan here and then working at the Center for Culture and Technology on social, using media for social good, developing relationships with communities to create media works which communicate issues of sustainability and culture. So really excited to be here. We're both a little saddened that we couldn't be there with you in beautiful Colombia, but maybe next time or in the future. So I'd like to start first by, well, I guess second now, but to start off by saying that the University of British Columbia is on the traditional territories of the Silks Okanagan people, who have been here for generations and generations and thousands of years, looking after the land and living in in harmony and accord with the natural rhythms that the environment provides. Since the British and French settlement of Canada and British Columbia, moreover, there's been some real atrocities to the culture and the people and the languages of all Indigenous peoples in Canada, including the Silks Okanagan people. What we're looking at doing is working together so that we can create some future where the different points of views and worldviews can be incorporated into providing a healthier future for everybody and all living things. And from taking the lessons from these worldviews of the Silks Okanagan people, I feel that that is one important step forward into creating a more harmonious world for all of us here in the Okanagan and Canada, and hopefully the world moreover. I'm a visitor here in the Okanagan, a settler. I came from, almost like a double settler coming from Australia, which has its own protocols and modalities of working and its own histories, which are very similar to what we have here in Canada. I come from immigrant parents who were from Europe, who moved to Australia during one of the great upheavals of our violent past that we have as a Western population. So hopefully moving forward to find peace, love, and harmony would be really great. So I'm going to present today with the slides, and Alexandra will chime in when she can. Alexandra is in Belgrade at the moment, so hopefully the connection stays consistent. And if there's any problems, please let us know. Let's see. Okay, so during this presentation, if you have, please feel free to chime in if you're available, if you're able to. I'll also have a look at the meeting chat feed to see if anything comes up from anybody that you'd like me to cover again, or some points of clarification as we move through. If we're moving too slowly, then that our time limit has reached its end, and we're still chatting and things like that, then please let us know, and we can cut it when it needs to be cut. But otherwise, it looks like there's roughly 2 hours, so the presentation should take maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, and then we can open it for discussion after that. Yeah, so thanks to Tom and everyone for inviting us to come and give this presentation today. We're going to go through some of the conceptual frameworks and logistics regarding the Waterways project that looks at approaching sustainability through media arts interventions. And so we'll be covering the topics that surround that, including the different kinds of systems approaches of working with different community groups, the aesthetics of media arts, and the technologies that integrate into these experiences that we design. So we like to start with this quote from John Robinson about how, asking the question of, how can human activities lead to an improvement of both the environment and human well-being. So, typically, we were doing pretty well with the environment until the Industrial Revolution. And, at that point, we were doing pretty well for ourselves. But then, the environmental impact of what we're doing has been a significant factor in human-induced climate change and the Anthropocene, which has, I think it was just yesterday, it was there was this, what is it? It was noted the point of the Anthropocene is at a lake in Ontario in Canada. They put a golden spike into the ground to note where it all started. So a lot of people they're arguing that it started in the Industrial Revolution. There's a whole committee on this. But what they're looking at now is when a uranium isotope 256 was first introduced into the environment, which is a non-natural occurring process of nuclear weapons testing. We're starting to see that turn up in the environment in around the 1950, and so there's a mark there to denote that. So I mean, these sorts of things, using technology and our activities to generate bombs and wars and the kinds of catastrophic climatic impacts that we're seeing, aren't going to necessarily be sustainable or improve the environment or our well-being. So how can we conduct our activities while still having the things that we need, like food, shelter, comfort, at the same time as improving the environment? So these are the kind of a dyadic look at two scenarios where we've been having the industrial age society of mass production through through resource extraction and using of fossil fuels, heavy load on an overabundance, so that we're consuming and throwing away so much waste, that we have global systems of production where, like, I can grow some kale or spinach in my front yard, and plant a seed, and it will grow, and I can go out and pick it. But that's not normal for the North American context, or for many contexts indeed. Whereas it's usually we'll go down to the shop and there's this nice looking vegetable on the shelf, and we'll pick that up and we'll buy that. But, just to try and backtrack to, where that's gone. I mean, at some point, somebody planted a seed, but it could be in another country somewhere, and the kinds of, farming practices which they use for commercial farming, can also be, questionable as for sustainability. And then, it gets picked, on a tractor, on a truck, it gets, washed, it goes to one warehouse, goes to another warehouse, then it goes on some, large transportation network, arrives in the country of its destination, then goes through a few more warehouses and, so on and so forth before it gets to the aisle. So that kind of, that global production and supply, needs to be rethought. And that's what we have on the right-hand side of this graphic here with the regenerative society, where we can take all the things that we need, such as, energy, food, materials, and well-being. However, we can create a more sustainable and resilient society by thinking about how we can make our activities, improve the, well-being and the environment. So things like, moving from fossil fuels to alternative sources of energy, tidal, wind, sun, and so forth. Thinking about, instead of global supply chains, thinking about local supply chains. How can we just think about what the environment that we have provides and find sustenance and the things that we need off that. And also, the incredible amount of waste, if we can reduce that, that's not going to be a bad thing. And the relationality between, people and, within the regenerative society system in order to improve the well-being of us all. And so down the bottom here, we have how this works within a systems approach, where we have the idea of the living system in a regenerative, where things live and die, and things that are produced from the decay are the energy for the continuing cycle. Whereas in the sustainability as sacrifice, things get extracted, and there's waste from that, there's waste from the goods in production, there's waste from the goods in use, and it all goes into a big hole in the ground somewhere. And so I'm sure that those big holes in the ground, those large, trash garbage dumps we have in, like, maybe, another 160,000 years, when it all breaks down, then it'll be another source to continue the sustainability of sacrifice. But in the present and for our near future, we need to really start thinking about how we can change things in a positive way. I'm just going to reduce one of my windows here because it's in the way. Okay, great. Half great.
Are you going to skip that slide, Miles?
Sorry? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this idea that John Robinson brought forward about regenerative sustainability is the idea that every action we make, if we begin to analyze our actions in terms of how they affect the environment and affect our environment, and both social and ecological in a positive way, we can offset the damages that we have done. Whereas in the context of industrial society, sustainability is seen as a sort of sacrifice, because we have to stop acting, we have to stop traveling, we have to stop using the fossil fuels, and it's seen as a very negative thing. So the question is, how can we culturally shift that view into making choices that can have positive actions? And Also understanding recently from the most recent IPCC report that nature regenerates, and if we can protect forests that are already existing and protect our environment to what we have left, that the nature will regenerate very quickly. So in the context of our work, people create places and places create people. And this slide is really showing that interaction between we affect our environment, and our choices and everyday choices can make a big difference. And so do you want to move to the next slide? And in the context of understanding what the solutions are for the environmental and social challenges we created in our current global world, we still have a challenge of climate change communication, where we get lots of sort of sources coming out from everywhere into the public, and some are scientific and some are climate change deniers, and some sources focus still on protecting the capitalism and profits. And then the public is still confused, because the public, you know, at the end of the day, what do I do? How do I act? How can I every day make the positive, make positive choices that can positively affect the environment? These sorts of mass media communication does create confusion. So can you move to the next slide? And what we are, the work, the cultural work that we are developing, the context of communities, how can we find interactive ways to work with the community, to understand what the local solutions are, what the local values are, and then move together as a community in sharing that knowledge and sharing the solutions, and working in arts and culture as almost as an integral part to working out the solutions. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So the local, the holistic approach, the solution-oriented approach, and experiential approaches, they're really effective, because those things, and in the context of arts, those things can have, those elements can interplay really well together, because experience is clear and engaging, and one can hopefully leave the events and in a sort of way in which some solutions and some ways of being and the values could be shifted in that context. Sorry, Miles. Can you go to the next slide? So this is still on climate change. If we, this slide comes from Stephen Shepard on his CEMA, Climate Change Causes, Impact, Mitigation and Adaptation. And if we focuses on all the impacts that our actions are doing, can you change the slide? We get, Miles, can you change the slide, please? So, Miles, do you hear me, sweetie?
I'm finding it very difficult to hear you from my computer for some reason, but next slide.
Yeah, next slide, please. Next slide. There. If the focus on causes usually brings the guilt, the sense of guilt and denial, the impacts, the fires, the floods, and all these increasing weather challenges bring doom and gloom. Whereas if the action and the mitigation and adaptation, the focus on solutions can bring hope and action and can give people a sense of direction of what we can do every day to make a difference. So Miles, I'm going to leave you with this now. Okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So one of the things that we do is creating interactive systems that allow sensory journeys for people in different kinds of contexts, such as museums, art galleries, in other public places, where communicating the kinds of solution-based way forward to enable people to feel empowered that there is something that they can do, and that is contextually relevant to them for their local personal experiences in the environment that they find themselves. So one of the lovely things about interactive systems is that it encourages people to become, a part of the work. And by doing so, they're able to have, more deeply embodied experiences with the work that is being communicated. And this is seen from from children all the way to adults and everywhere in between, where they see themselves reflected in the work by them being empowered to influence the story as it is unfolding with their interactions. And so by doing that, we're hoping to create more meaningful experiences where people will take that embodied experience and and feel that that it resonates with them more deeply for longer periods of time. So when that's the where we have the idea about the meaning. And because these are designed spaces, these interactive systems, it challenges the realities that they can be fluid and dynamic and changing. So by taking the particular facets of the way things are, and being able to rework them into the way that things could be. So that way, it if you can interact with something that's changed to show different possibilities, then that we have the ability to to have visions towards moving in a particular direction. In this case here, we have.
Do you want me to take this slide?
Yeah, the idea of an interface. Now, Alexandra could probably speak.
Can you hear me?
To this slide.
Yeah, available. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Alex, you there?
Yep, Can you hear? Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me? No. Hello? No.
Yeah, can you speak to this slide?
I am speaking, but I don't seem to. Does this look like you can hear? Can you
We
hear me
can
now?
hear you, but maybe Miles are not hearing you, but we all can hear you, Alexandra.
Okay, good. He can't hear me. All right, I'll try. So this slide is taken from or opted from Richard. Okay, thank you. From Richard Schachner's analysis of the ritual studies, and of course Victor Turner and Schachner extensively saw art and performance as a powerful way to engage the communities, especially in the contemporary industrial age, where we kind of lost that communal ways of being. So this is a slide that shows the ritual rites of passage, rituals, and on one side we have the ordinary state of being ourselves on one side, and then on the other side we have the projected self or the transformative aspects of the ritual. And of course, in traditional cultures, the puppets and masks and songs and stories, they all have a role of transporting the ritual subject from the ordinary day to day into extraordinary transformation, so that once you come out of the ritual context, you can come with support of the song and art, you come transformed. So do you want to go to the next slide? Drawing from that, we created a diagram that looks at the interface design. And so, of course, the computational media art can be seen also in some ways as that ritual interface where we can bring people into with the song and the dance and the image and story into that extraordinary space to come out, change and transform. So those are the two slides. Miles, you can go on. Or let's see what's next slide is. So yeah, in that context and learning from working with the traditional arts, especially for myself, I spent time studying in Bali, the shadow puppetry. What I discovered there, that the interactivity is really about space, time, and context of the place, and the role of art and song is to link day to day to the eternal wisdoms. And so for us, this idea of working in the space, time, and context of the local events, no matter what the event may be. Today, we're going to talk about the waterways in the Okanagan. It's really working with community to understand what the context is, where the knowledge is, be in place and time, and then find and communicate the important stories so that we can move together in a coordinated way as a community for both social justice and environmental well-being, because those two things cannot be separated. So heavily drawing from traditional cultures, the processes in order to design our contemporary media that our culture is immersed in. Miles, do you want to move the slide? Okay, you can go ahead now.
Sure. So how we can see that the interactive experience fits in within systems of relationship when we're communicating issues of sustainability is expressed here in that there are, numerous numerous moving parts that need to come together, and each of these parts brings its own minutiae of detail and opportunities and challenges, which need to be integrated into a design in order for it to operate in the world with some impact that it's designed to do. These are kinds of projects are typically, interdisciplinary in that it includes, cultural voices, scientific aspects, the technology and development, and to be able to put these things together into a cohesive story. And often the case there's, you find the things that work together that are complementary. Often we can have some contradictions which arise. The back and forth and the integration of these different points of view, are what makes, for the, success of any interdisciplinary study, including this one here. A strong part of the work that we do engages with community, and this this is not a an element which is quick or speedy, but rather something that takes time to form relationships with different partners in order to be able to have rich back and forth of ideas, and to find some mutually beneficial symbiotic kind of relationship that is long lasting and often requires much care and thought. And the wonderful thing about communities, besides them being communities with their own with their own cultures and ways of doing things, is that it provides an important context in order to launch the kinds of stories and details of the communication system that is being designed. The generative art aspect of things allows for the composition that unfolds to be fluid, in that it can be always changing, which keeps the novelty of the system for people to view it multiple times and to come back and forth. It allows the work to be able to move through different kinds of conceptual spaces in order to take the content and bring it into different contextual points of focus, to be able to, in order to pull out different parts of the stories, etc. And then, of course, the concept of sustainability is a very powerful story, in that there's the history of cultural narratives that have existed pre settlement, pre industrial revolution, and what we have now. And we can start to look at these different narratives and imagine how we can change the world that we live in for the better. This graphic here demonstrates the interacting components of a generative system. So the generative system is the interactive media artworks that we've been describing in some high level. But at its core, it is a generative system that has a knowledge base and a set of rules that will generate different experiences over time. and then how that works within in the larger context of the the dynamic composition and interactivity and culture and sustainability is shown here by, we can look at let's say the environment. We can take environmental data through sensor readings, sound recordings, documentation of environments through the image and video, and other kinds of mapping and landscape data. They can be threaded together within the data that we can find from different cultures, from interviews, other kinds of social data, and interactivity. These things feed that into some encoding, where we will can map the numbers or the text or the media into some kind of algorithm program, which will then decide on how it was going to unfold the stories and narratives that are embedded within that data system. So that brings us to the Waterways project. This encapsulates all of the concepts that we've talked about to this point here. So the waterway system was developed over 5 or 10 years, working with
5 years
community here in the Okanagan, in order to communicate the sustainability issues around water in the Okanagan. So the Okanagan, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a semi-arid desert, and it even has a small piece of real desert down in Osoyoos. And because of this, water scarcity and management is very, very important here. The city of Kelowna, which is the largest city in the Okanagan, sits on an old wetland and floodplain, which comes from a river that spreads into the Okanagan Lake, which is a 160-kilometer long glacial lake up here. The city sits on the old delta, which would spread into the lake, and there was wetlands and very dynamic. Since settlement, all the waterways have been channelized. So we now have 3 or 4 main rivers or creeks which flow from the mountains directly into the lake here. And the whole city has kind of been raised up in order for it not to get flooded, although flooding is still a challenge because water, although it can be very, very soft, is one of the stronger, is very, very strong as well, and it will go where it wants to go. So when there is flooding here, the downtown will be susceptible to that. So previously the water would flow into into the wetland system and disperse into the ground, but due to the channelization of all the water systems, it now will be able to break its banks, and the loss of habitat which comes from those actions as well. But what we wanted to show in the Waterways project was not so much about how degraded the current systems are that we've built into the landscape here, for agriculture and urban development, but rather to highlight how beautiful and the places of magic that exist here in the Okanagan still. So for 4 years, Alexandra and I shadowed the resident biologist at the Inalkin Center down in Penticton, and followed the restoration work that they're doing down there, which is quite extraordinary. that is, bringing back the salmon, which I don't know, like salmon in Canada is a really big thing. They migrate from the ocean, like several hundred kilometers inland up the river system to lay their eggs, and then will go back out once they're small fish to the ocean, then come back, and it's an amazing phenomenon. It's also one of the 4 food chiefs for the Silk Okanagan people. That is very important to them spiritually, and as a food source. The salmon was almost extinct, or was more or less extinct because of like damming and other human-based interventions, which stopped the water, and the fish weren't able to swim back up. But some of the restoration work they've been doing at Anauken there is to bring the salmon back. So they had a 20-year project of getting the salmon back, and we went there, and you can go there now, and there's these big, beautiful red fish that have come up from the ocean, and it's an amazing story. And they're going to keep on coming back year after year because of the way that the Silks People Okanagan Nations Alliance worked with municipal governments and territories here in Canada and the US to create fish ladders and things like that. So taking imagery of these kinds of success stories. This particular set of images here is from video footage that we shot at White Lake. It's a protected zone. There's also a radio radio telescope here, so there's no radio frequency, no cell towers, and all these sorts of things. You go there, and it's so peaceful, like you can feel it in your chest. It's amazing, and it's very, very beautiful. So we wanted to highlight these places of wonder that exist around the Okanagan.
Can I say something on that? Can you hear me, Miles?
And so, we documented through the audio recordings and the video, and then we, working with some of our research assistants, designed these boxes. These are media units. So in each box, there's a television screen for playing the video. There's a speaker for playing audio at the front and at the back. There's 7 of these boxes. 5 of them have got imagery of the local environment. And the one on the right-hand side there, you can see, has a virtual world of the Okanagan that was recreated based on historical records and early aerial mapping data, then overlaid what the city looks now on top of it, so you can kind of compare and contrast, and just to understand a little bit about how things were and how things are. These are then arranged in a circle, so you can be immersed to the inside. Here's another example of some of the data that we're able to collect with our colleagues John Wagner and Lael Perot, who work in environmental complexity science and
Miles, can I say something?
On the left here, this is what Kelowna watershed used to look like. So all the blue squiggles are the oxbows and the wetland, the wetland environment that was existing there before. The green area it was all basically wetland all through there. That's the delta that flows out into the lake on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have Kelowna, how it is today. And you can see there that there's 3 or 4 creeks which now flow into the lake, which is highlights the dramatic change which this environment has undergone in the past 7,500 years. This is just a fly through of the virtual worlds. So it was modeled pretty well. There's you know, the lake outline and everything was based on topological data that we had of the region. The housing is used through plotted in there from Open Maps, which is an open source mapping tool, which also has the current environment on top of there. So this is you know roughly the overlay that we have. This is the original environment that was recreated. So there's numerous, you know, the indigenous plant and animal species that we modeled based on, you know, the ones that are still here, and botanical records. We also worked with a number of fluent Insulchan speakers from the Okanagan community.
The beaver,
he's
the only one that made dams
the original
in the past.
or the silks
make
names
dams,
for
like,
the different plants and animals.
They control the water, they reroute water, they straighten out water.
There's different points on the map where you can click on the
whatever year
animal
they
or on the
started
plant, and it
trapping
will
and
say
taking
the
furs of the beaver.
you know, it will
The
say
beaver
the
couldn't make
Insulchan
any
name
more
for
dams
it.
like they used to because they're all gone.
And also show
Now, the water
some
is moving
information
too fast.
regarding the importance
because
and
when the water is slower,
the
with
use
the beavers making the dams,
of the different plants in the
then the water
environment.
is just right for the salmon.
Yeah, so
almost lost
Insulchan is the language spoken here in the Okanagan, and it's a low resource language. It was an endangered language, but through efforts from the community and the Anaukan Center, the Insulchan language is you know, now you know, no longer an endangered language. You know, it's still a low resource language, and we're doing a lot of work here in order to you know, increase the ability of you know, creating tools and teaching Insulchan. As a matter of fact, Dr. Jeanette Armstrong, who's like a super powerhouse, has you know, helped to spearhead the first Insulchan or Indigenous language program at Canadian University, the Bachelor of Insulchan Fluency program. So there's some really great stories there to celebrate too. This is another shot of the installation. As you would walk in there, all the screens are synchronized to a particular concept. So there's, I think there's like, you know, 110 hours of interview footage, at least maybe, you know, 4 or 5 times that in, you know, landscape documentation. And each of, you know, the particular landscapes, you know, whether it's the cottonwoods or the birds, the chats, the salmon, the White Lake, that we map those into a conceptual framework where each of those places is a concept. Similarly, with the interview footage, they're all tagged as being, you know, particular concept. So there's this web of concepts that the system is able to navigate and explore, that creates an ever-changing motif of related dialogue that is experienced when walking through. One example of that, of the tags that we would use, would be adaptive co-management. Here is a number of the people from you know, traditional ecological knowledge from the Silks and the Okanagan communities, Western scientists, and you know, they all will talk about a particular thing about working together in order to manage environmental resources that you know, that are important to the Okanagan for everybody, and how we can, you know, create more sustainable practices and the things that are being done in order to make that happen. Oh yeah, here's those fish we were talking about. Happy fish. Yeah. So this would be an example of, if there was 3 of the screens, how they would synchronize for, showing related content in order to create some aesthetic immersion that would bring people in. Because, how can you not smile at a happy fish? They're so healthy. The water is so clean compared to how it was. So these kinds of success stories about things that are already happening and have happened and continue to happen, rather than the gloomy the gloomy kind of concepts which are still existing, and we shouldn't ignore those, but giving people a break to appreciate and fall back in love with the environment and the nature that they're in order to be encouraged to feel positive, to make differences in their lives, and to contribute in sustainable ways to the continuation of the magic of these kinds of places. Here would be another concept, the restoration initiatives. Again, there's so many people here that are involved in these projects, and hearing their voices as they're stitched through the different kinds of media brings an extra power to it. This would be standing inside the circle. There's also the magnets on there, so kids can come along and they can arrange their own motifs of bears and fish and eagles. This is one of the interviews with Dr. Jeanette Armstrong. She also featured in the selection of interviews. So I'll just play an excerpt from this now.
That whole system of extraction and capitalization for profitability needs to be rethought. And that's what Indigenous people, I think, have the most to offer. That's what's destroying the land, the extraction, based on profitability, based on capitalism. And so that needs to be changed unequivocally, or else this climate change won't be mitigated. The water won't be safe for us to drink or safe for a salmon to live in the future. That's what's causing these fires all over our territory. You think about why there are fires here in the Okanagan this summer. All these fires. Every one of those trees that have burnt, how many gallons of water do they represent holding? They're standing there holding that water for us, so it can be part of this system to feed the birds and the insects and the living things. How much biomass, in your terminology, disappears in an area that's burnt out? How much water has disappeared is the real issue, right? So when we're looking at changing the system, I think this conversation needs to go further into the future in areas that people don't want to talk about. And that's that idea of extractive capitalism in terms of profitability, but instead turning that over and saying, okay, how many homeless, how many mothers with children that don't have any way of providing, how many people of low income, how many people in terms of food and nutrition security, not any color, not any ethnicity, but everybody in this valley. Let's make sure these salmon provide for them, like my great-grandfather did, like every one of us need to think about. So that's what I'm really strong on and really want to get that message across. We can do that as people together.
So we conducted an evaluation of the exhibit with using a visual matrix approach, which allowed everybody to experience the exhibit, and then to share their stories about what images emerged for them and to discuss those as a way of understanding, what, not just about what we were trying to communicate, but, what the imagery, brought up for people about the, about the contexts that were being represented there. And we found that through 2 interviews, that the stories were certainly guided by the framework that we implemented into the exhibit, bringing the ideas of the fragility and the beauty of nature, but also the challenges of sustainability that we're facing today. So that looks like it's been smack on 1 hour. Probably stop rattling on just to give people's ears a break and see what's next.
Thank you, Miles and Alexandra, for your presentation. We open this space for questions.
Oh, you can hear me now because I tried to say something for the rest of the presentation. So if you guys don't mind, I do want to say something.
Of
Is that
course,
okay?
please.
Yeah.
It is okay for
So
us.
I just want to pick up. I'm sorry, I'm now in a noisy environment because I'm outside. But what I wanted to say that this exhibition also had other collaborators and co-investigators. This was funded by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and it was a 5-year project. Multiple funding and partners were involved. And Dr. Jeanette Armstrong was a co-investigator on the project, and she is the SILC leader, knowledge keeper, and for all the work that has been done in the context of the exhibition and in the context of the interviews, she gave us conceptual guidance and sort of ability to conduct this work. I just want to stress that this was a collaborative effort. We also had the scientist, Dr. Lael Parrott, who is a complexity science, a person as a co-investigator, as well as environmental anthropologist, Dr. John Wagner, and another Indigenous scholar, Dr. Marla Sam, who conducted interviews. The Silks people are cross-boundary nation, so they are separated artificially by the what they call 49th parallel, goes through Silk's backyard by U.S. and Canada border, and Dr. Marla Sam did interviews along Colombia with Colville tribe members, and brought that perspective to our project. And yeah, that I just wanted to acknowledge the group. I was trying to say that. So thank you. Now I can stop.
No, thank you, Alexandra, and again, Miles, for your exposition. And as I have said, I open the space for questions. Does anybody want to have? There is a question here in the chat. Thank you very much, says Julio. It is a very interesting and powerful proposal. At the beginning, you commented on the impact on changing mental models. How have you evaluated or evidenced this change in mental models? I don't know if Miles or Alexandra wants to answer this question.
I would like to answer this question. It's a great question and a really important one, because when it comes down to the way we live today, there is a huge clash in the worldviews. And especially coming from knowledge keepers and traditional perspective in the context of Okanagan, where people lived sustainably for thousands of years without damaging the environment. And then I just want to say, when we did this visualization, we found the aerial photo from the Kelowna area, which was only 80 years old. In 80 years, the Okanagan has been transformed so dramatically that is maybe only few percent of wetlands left, no space for nature, no space for water to hold itself in the context of the environment. And it comes down to the worldviews, what are our priorities? Is the priority in decisions we make and the way we change environment profitability, or is the priority access, just access for all animals, plants, and people? And those, if I'm to polarize those worldviews, they're way more complex. What these interviews were really essential for providing the multiplicity of the worldviews and sharing those different views and different ways forward in terms of how we can approach our environment. So I hope that answers that question. But I think for me personally, it really boils down to the approach of how we approach our actions and what sort of choices do we make. And so hope, the hope, this exhibition, a part of the exhibition was really focused on sharing those worldviews in the context of urban environments within Okanagan, and bringing those values, different values and worldviews into the public domain, into the urban domain, out of the reserve into the public, so to speak.
Thank you, Alexandra. Is there another question we have here in the chat? Not a question, but an affirmation. I don't know if I can translate it that well, but the structural algorithm are deployed. In the images represented the viral dance of the complex thinking. I don't know who is read me note, but he or she is telling that. And is there another question or comment or a reaction on that? Okay, we have a question here.
Hi, Alexandra. Hi, Miles. I apologize in advance for my English. Well, I would like to know for you how art provides the opportunity to weave cooperative and collaborative relationships for a sustainable world. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Isabel. And if you can consider also this question that we also have in the chat. Did you consider exploit other possibilities that could turn clashing cultural views move to contemporary collaborative learning together? So go ahead, Miles or Alexandra.
I think the multi-voice approach in this context is essential to building common ground, because when it comes down to it, we all love our environment and we want to see it healthy, and everybody's worried about the rate of change that we're experiencing with climate at the moment. And we're not meeting, Canada is also not meeting their targets, you know, and so we all care about environment. And when the crisis hits, everybody's affected with fires, with floods, with increased stone surges, which we are all experiencing across the globe. So building and finding those connections for a just world is an important thing. It's an important step, because only if we can share the views and we can share values, can we move together and collaborate. But I do feel that sharing values is the first step to collaboration. Miles, I don't know if I want to pick up from that, but yeah, thank you for that question.
Yeah, the conceptual space that the system explores, brings the different voices, and sometimes contrasting contexts to sort of to feed from one to the other. To make a concrete example, where we have the feel-good story regarding return of the salmon, for example. But then we also have within that within the conceptual space, the system can explore topics of injustice, injustice to community, injustice to the environment, and so the generous system is able to weave a thread between these different concepts in order to help guide the viewer or the person experiencing it through the contrasting views, but in a way that is still kind and makes sense within the aesthetic the aesthetic design that we the installation is meant to engender there.
Sorry, can
No,
I
go
just
ahead.
say this is what when you were talking about the beautiful environments, we almost constructed some of the environments, because these days you can hardly go anywhere without the highway noise and without seeing the urban development, but that was based on John Wagner's idea of the landscape aesthetics, because our environment in the Okanagan has changed so dramatically in such a short time of 80 years that people who live in Okanagan, including myself as an immigrant, don't understand what the Okanagan ought to look like, so that you see European grass everywhere and the trees that simply don't belong, and the urban environment looks like it could be anywhere else. So we wanted to almost invoke the Aphrodite's, the beauty of the world, and bring the Okanagan beauty to the forefront as a way of getting people to fall in love with the environment. And so if the exhibition, if something we love, and if we love our environment, then surely we won't hurt it, because we don't hurt things we love. So yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And we have two more questions, or one question and one comment. One question is from Ragav. An issue like climate change can be overwhelming for an individual. How will the initial impetus provided by this generative art be carried forward into changes in people's views and practices? And Sylvia also says, building common ground is highly valuable. What lessons learned can you share about including wider range of voices, enriching our understanding and comprehension of life, the wave of life, beauty sound attractive, love always cares? Go ahead, please.
So one of the things I want to say about the lessons learned, we're very fortunate, because this was a collaborative project, that most of the interviews we did were two-person interviews, one conducted by Sarah Alexis, who is a silk scholar, and she's Dr. Jeanette Armstrong's student, and the other person, Maria Correa, who is also a PhD student. She's a settler Canadian. And we deliberately have worked through this methodology to have the interviews were conducted as a cross-cultural team to approach the broad range of actors, including government, municipal officials, and the Columbia system experts. So we had a broad variety of voices that were brought together to speak about projects such as Return of the Salmon, because that's a practical project that is now over 25 years. And these projects are really difficult because Columbia River is one of the very heavily dammed river because it's used for electrical production. And the fish needs to go through the entire US, the entire Columbia system to get to the Okanagan River to actually get to the lake. So if you think about those projects are rarely successful because they're so complex. But it was through the multi-pronged collaboration between the federal government, because they are responsible for the fisheries, the municipal responsibility for the lake, and the US. Those multi-jurisdictional approach was, the Silk people were able, because they're cross-boundary, were able to lift pretty much every barrier over the last 20 years for us to see the sockeye back. Yeah. So I do feel that we did have diverse voices, though the voices were focused on particular projects that were successful. So in that way, they were already selected. They're being selected as a successful cross-cultural collaboration. And the reason why we had to choose that is to find a model of a healthy model of working together for the success story, as in the future is now. If we can build on successes and expand those successes further, then we're more likely to extend those initiatives.
Yeah,
Miles, I don't know if you want to add.
Well, I was just going to say, I think you covered it very well there. I just wanted to comment on Sylvia's question regarding about the lessons learned about a wide range of voices. I mean, for me and probably us personally, exploring and spending time in these environments with with the different creatures and the different plants, which are creatures by themselves. I would also like to say that by showing these these environments, we're also bringing the voice of nature to the table as well. That just through their unfolding in the environment, that they speak quite loudly as well. So not only the interviews of people talking, but the plants who are all in the video and in the audio, the wind. These are all living living beings. Not any less than the human voices. So I found that bringing these voices through just their state of being in the world, a very powerful motivation in the exhibit material.
Well, thank you very much again, Miles and Alexandra, for your presentation, and we are very pleased and thankful for you accepting our invitation to this international encounter. Thank you all the assistants for being here presentially and the ones that are virtually